What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another video. Thank you for tuning in. Today's video is going to dispel some common myths, 9 of them to be specific, that a lot of people believe to be true about the realities of special operations. And I am going to go through each myth and kind of tell you why they're myths and what you need to take away for yourself if you are pursuing a career in SFAS, what the reality is, and what you can expect moving forward. This will be a little bit biased towards Army because I am a former Green Beret and spent my entire career either training for or serving in Special Forces. So although all of these myths definitely do apply to every domain of SOF, I'm speaking personally from my experience in special operations on the Army side. So before we hop into the video, if you could just take a second to like and subscribe. And if you like what you hear, go ahead and leave a comment, share it with a buddy, or whatever you find most appropriate. That will help my channel grow, help me reach more people, and for that, I would be greatly appreciative. So let's hop into the myths. The first one is that you have to be a super stud or a natural athlete, a former high-performing athlete in order to perform well in SOF or in order to even make it into SOF. And that is not the case. Of course, having an athletic background will help you, especially if you have a history of sports that involve endurance and a little bit of strength. You're going to be at an advantage when you get into your selection prep. When you go through your entire pipeline, you're going to probably be better coordinated. You're probably going to have better proprioception, body awareness, and you're also just going to have that overall base of cardiovascular fitness and hopefully some strength. That being said, plenty of guys that I have served with don't have an athletic background, and it is comical to watch them try and do athletic things. However, they've been some of the highest performing and most capable Green Berets that I've served with. So, I had a buddy on my team. We'd go, on deployments or we'd go on training trips and we'd bring a football and he would always play with us, which is hilarious. And he, at first, didn't even know which foot to step with when he was throwing a football. He threw right-handed, and when he first started, he would step also with the right foot. So if that doesn't scream, I don't know what I'm doing athletically, I don't know what does. On the flip side, even if you do have a big time athletic background, a lot of people think that that will kind of carry them through, or they'll have some sort of big advantage at selection, or the instructors will know that, the cadre will know that, and they'll be like, oh, this guy's a former athlete, so we definitely should pick him regardless. And that is not the case either. I've seen multiple people with Division I sports backgrounds, as well as even semi-pro backgrounds, that don't make it through selection, or they don't make it through the Q course because they think that their history is a lot more relevant to what they're doing right now than it actually is. The only thing that matters while you're there is how you perform from day one to whenever the last day is of your selection. At SFAS, Special Forces Assessment and Selection, it's 21 days. So you got to perform from day 1 to day 21. Other selection processes are longer, but either way, fact remains, you still have to perform while you're there, and it doesn't matter what you used to do. And this goes beyond just physical performance as well. It is also your psychology, your grit, your determination, your perseverance, your interpersonal skills. All those things come into play. And just because you played Division I football, or just because you used to run ultra marathons or whatever it may be, does not give you a big, massive advantage while you're there. Of course, it gives you a good baseline to start with training-wise, but that's not enough. Like, you actually still have to put the work in. You still have to perform from day 1 to whenever it's over. And if you don't, then you're not going to make it regardless of what you used to do. So myth number 1, you don't have to be a super stud, but even if you are a super stud, don't let that get to your head and think that it's going to carry you through, because it's not. Myth number 2 is you have to be super jacked and super shredded. You have to look like Rambo, or you have to look like your Men's Fitness magazine cover model, photo shoot ready. And that's not the case. Of course, taking care of yourself and performing at a high level physically, sometimes the byproduct of that is you look a lot more athletic, you look muscular, you look lean, you look capable. And I think that's important. I'll get into looking the part in a later myth. But if that comes at the expense of your ability to shoot, move, communicate, medicate, then you're doing it wrong. A lot of guys think that once they get through selection, once they get through the pipelines for various SOF units, they need to start getting more jacked so they look more like a cool guy. And yes, you do look pretty cool when you're jacked. However, there's a limit to that. There's a point of diminishing returns. Being super duper jacked usually comes at the expense of other physical capabilities, as well as you can potentially become a liability, because if you weigh 250 pounds because you just thought it would be really cool to hop on a bunch of gear when you deployed and put on 30 pounds of muscle, it's going to negatively affect your ability to move. It's going to negatively affect your endurance, your stamina, but also it's going to affect the guys around you. Oftentimes, guys will get crazy, crazy jacked, especially on deployment. And if they go down and they're 30 pounds heavier, plus all the gear and kit that they're wearing, it's a very difficult task to go and render aid to that person, drag them behind cover, especially for one person, probably even two people, sometimes even three people, just depending on the situation. So there's definitely a point of diminishing returns. There's definitely a limit to how jacked you want to get. And being super duper jacked and super duper shredded, although you may think it makes you look cooler in uniform, or you think that you have to look that way for your job, it's not necessarily the case. And you are much better off focusing on being healthy, performing well, putting the right things into your body, doing the right type of training, working on your weaknesses, maintaining your strengths, and being as well-rounded and highly capable as you possibly can as a special operator. And if you happen to look a little bit more jacked and a little bit more lean and a little bit more like a freak of nature as a byproduct of that training, that's fine. Everyone's got different genetics, different propensities towards gaining muscle, being lean, etc. Great. But soft guys come in all shapes and sizes, and there's no like perfect physique or perfect size or perfect height and weight or body fat percentage for soft. I've been around guys that were highly capable at 170 pounds. I've been around guys that were highly capable at 200 pounds. That would probably be like a solid range. Of course, it depends on your height. If you're much taller, maybe being 220, 230 might be more realistic for you. If you feel good at that weight, you can perform well at that weight. If you're 5'6" and you are more of an endurance guy, but you're strong enough to do your job at a high level, maybe you might weigh 155 pounds, 160 pounds. That is not necessarily a bad thing either. So capability is the most important part of your physical repertoire as a soft guy. And it doesn't matter if you're crazy, crazy jacked, if you suck at most things physically, or if you're a liability to your team. Which brings us to myth number 3. In order to make it, in order to be successful, all you have to do is not quit. So quitting obviously is grounds for dismissal. You're not going to make it if you quit. But in almost every soft selection or pipeline, that is just one of the non-negotiable first steps. So you obviously don't have the option to quit if you want to be successful. But with that, just not quitting is not going to be the answer for you. It's not going to get you to where you want to go. You have to show up and you have to perform, and you have to continue to perform and prove that you can perform under stress, under sleep deprivation, under food deprivation. And even if you don't quit, but you still perform like shit, then you're not going to make it in most different soft selections. An analogy that I would use for this one, just telling someone that all they have to do is not quit, is like a CEO or a business owner telling his employee, all you have to do for success in this job is to just show up to work. That is literally the entry cost. That is the cost of doing business. It's a non-negotiable, but if you were a business owner and you just hired people that showed up, where do you think your business would go? Do you think you'd have a bunch of A players on your team that really got the job done for you and supported your values and your vision and your dream of success? Probably not. So just not quitting is absolutely a non-negotiable thing. You can't quit, but at the same time, it is not enough. You have to show up, not quit, but also perform physically, get through things psychologically, and work as a contributing member and asset to your team in order to be successful. So lots and lots of guys show up to these selection processes and they don't quit, but they still don't make it. So just some food for thought. All right, myth number 4 is you cannot show emotion, or you cannot feel emotion. You have to be stoic. And a lot of people get the definition of stoicism mixed up. It does not mean that you don't have emotions or that you don't show emotions. Stoicism typically means that you are able to control your actions and your responses to certain emotions that may arise throughout the day. Emotions are a natural part of human existence, and feeling emotions and even showing emotions when the time is right is absolutely an essential part of life. However, a lot of people have the notion that soft guys are very, very stoic, but because they mix up the stoic definition with not showing or being emotional, they think that they have to not be emotional or they have to suppress them. What often happens when guys go too long trying to be super stoic because they think stoicism is not showing emotion is they make really, really bad decisions when they finally reach the end of their rope, or they suppress their emotions using drugs, alcohol, other vices that are very deleterious to mental and physical health. And that is not a great way to live at all for many different reasons, not just for yourself, but also the people around you. So being stoic or having stoicism is not the absence of emotion. It is the absence of making decisions based solely on emotions. So you need to separate your emotions, how you feel about something, from the correct rational decision that is actually the most appropriate decision for this moment in time. A lot of people go through life making decisions based on emotions. They feel sad, so they go eat. They feel sad, so they go drink. They feel tired, so they skip their training sessions. They feel anxious, so they use drugs or alcohol to calm that anxiety. And that is emotion-based decision making, and it is not a good way to go about life. But someone who is practicing stoicism would also feel those emotions, of course, because they're part of life, but would separate that from what actually needs to be done and do the right thing regardless of how they feel about it, because that's just what you have to do. This takes practice, it takes discipline, and it takes a conscientious person to actually be able to identify the emotion, what the emotion is making them think that they want to do, how that emotion is potentially going to alter their ability to make a sound decision. And they practice actually still making the best call based on what is right and wrong, not what they feel about something. So you don't have to have no emotion. You don't have to show no emotion. In fact, if you do these things, you are either going to have a very short-lived career, or you are just going to drive yourself nuts and you're going to really struggle with mental health. And the people around you are also going to be affected, not just your teammates, your coworkers, but also the people in your life, your family, your spouse, your kids, etc. So stoicism, make sure you have the right definition of it. It is very important for sure, but it is not emotionless or unable to show emotion. The next one is a little bit of a controversial one and situation dependent, but a lot of people believe that SOF is gone or away from home more often than conventional military. Of course, this depends on what the SOF unit is versus what the conventional unit is. It depends on what's going on in the world right now. It depends on a lot of different things, but generally, most SOF command teams, at least in the Army, are very supportive and even really prioritize making sure that when able, their soldiers are able to go home and spend time with their family and sleep with their head on the pillow. It does not always play out this way. There are lots of different individual schools, lots of different team trainings, lots of different deployments that potentially may come up and take you away from home. But a lot of times in the conventional military, they will have their guys go out into the field just to kind of check the block. Hey, we did our time in the field. And I've heard stories where guys are out in the field and they're 300 yards from their actual house. But because they're doing this field thing and they need to check the block of we spent this much time in the field, they're still sleeping in the shit, barely getting any sleep, getting MREs, and just hating life where they don't really need to be out in the field. In SOF, usually that is not the case. Of course, you go out in the field, you go train in different areas across the United States, even sometimes outside the United States. You go on your deployments, your JSETs, your combat deployments. But if given the opportunity to have guys be home at nighttime, lay their head down on their own pillow, usually SOF command teams will prioritize that. Another aspect of SOF that may be an advantage here is that it's easier to plan things ahead. Yes, plans change all the time. Long-term training calendars are almost never set in stone, but you generally have an idea of when you're probably not going to be home and when you are going to be home. Whereas in the conventional military, it's a little bit more sporadic and a little bit less structured. So you may think you're going to be home for a couple months and then boom, something comes up and you're out in the field, or you're going to a detail, or you're going TDY somewhere that you just had no idea was even a possibility. So that's another advantage to SOF. Of course, there's nuance here. If you are in a conventional unit and that unit doesn't really go and do much, maybe you're working at a base, you're doing some sort of job, like you're a cook or something along those lines, you probably won't be leaving very often. But at the same time, if you want to do that job, that's great. The military needs people to do that job. But if you have your sights set on SOF, but you're worried about being gone way, way, way more than another job that you potentially may pursue instead in the regular Army, just know that that may not always be the case, and you'll at least be able to most likely plan ahead and have a good idea of when you'll be gone, when you won't be gone. That way you can prepare your mind for it, you can prepare your family for it, you can prepare your finances, your house, etc. for times when you're away. Next myth is that there is no need to look the part. So I talked earlier about taking this a little bit too far, but also there absolutely is a need to look like a presentable SOF guy. The way I look at it is, if someone that is not really connected or is not part of SOF ever learns that you are a SOF guy, their reaction should be like, oh, okay, that adds up. It should not be one of surprise, like I would have never guessed that you're in SOF because of the way you appear, the way you look. That is not a good sign. If you tell someone you're in SOF, or someone else tells someone else that you're in SOF, and someone's like incredibly surprised just because you don't look like you are, yes, there's definitely potential benefits of blending in with the environment, but I would much rather look like a Green Beret, or look like a Navy SEAL, or look like a Ranger because of the way I conduct myself and the way my body and my face looks, than just look like a complete soup sandwich and have my gut hanging out over my belt, or when people talk to me, they can't tell where my chin ends and my neck begins. And unfortunately, especially in the Green Beret community, it's become kind of a stereotype where there's a lot of fat Green Berets, and it's super unfortunate, and it's something I've never stood for. And I think that that is something that should be fixed. Will it be fixed? I don't know. Maybe there's body composition standards, but at the same time, there's a lot of ways to get around that and circumvent it. And a lot of people think like, as long as you can perform physically, then it doesn't matter how you look, which I guess being able to perform is definitely more important. But first impressions really matter. And a lot of people will say, don't judge a book by its cover. But in reality, that is just what happens, especially when you are communicating with coworkers, or you're going to meet your team for the first time, or you're going to meet a partner force that wants to work with you and trust you and count on you in order to make them a better fighting force and support them in their endeavors. And if you go and look like a fat fuck when you introduce yourself, no matter what, that first impression is going to be a negative one. And you're going to have to make that up at some point down the road with your actual performance. And I would much rather not have to make anything up. I would rather set a great first impression, have incredible presence, charisma, ability to talk to people, look them in the eye, firm handshake, and also look like I take care of myself and I actually care about my fitness, than look completely sloppy, set a very questionable first impression, and then have to make up for it on the back end with a come from behind performance. So again, you don't have to look like a freak of nature. You don't have to look like a cover model. But my first team that I was on, our team leader implemented a no combat top profile for guys who didn't deserve to wear combat tops because of their fatness. Combat tops are a lot tighter fitting than a typical blouse that you'll wear in the military. You usually wear it to training, to ranges, to jumps, etc. But it's tighter fitting. So if you're fat, it's very revealing and you look like a sloppy mess in them. So my team leader would implement the no combat top profile for guys on the team that would make our team look bad because they're fat wearing a combat top, and they were not allowed to wear them during training. So if you show up to your team and you get put on a profile like that, or if someone says like you need to lose weight, you need to get your shit together, that is not a good place to start, or that's not a good place to get to, even if you're old, banged up. There are plenty of guys who are super banged up, been through a lot of combat deployments, lots of hard landings on jumps, have been around a ton of explosions and demolition, and they still are able to hold themselves together and differentiate their chin from their neck. So look the part. It is very important. The only people who tell you it's not important are the people who don't have the accountability or the discipline to look the part themselves. And I would suggest not listening to people who don't look the part and tell you it's okay not to look the part. It's usually just a cop-out or a way to kind of make themselves feel better about their lack of ability to make good decisions in the kitchen, around training, etc. The next one is that you're going to be an elite shooter and hand-to-hand killer if you go to SOF. And while there are absolutely elite shooters and hand-to-hand killers in SOF, they aren't that way solely due to their military training. Yes, you are absolutely going to be more physically capable with weapons as well as your hands than the average person. But if we're being honest, if you look around at the average person, that is not really setting the bar very high. It's pretty easy to be more lethal and harder to kill than the average American male. So that's not really saying much. You'll be for sure above average at shooting. You'll be for sure above average at handling yourself in a fight compared to most people, but you will not be elite unless, of course, you do a bunch of work on your own time. So the guys who are best at hand-to-hand combat usually do BJJ several times per week. The guys who are the best shooters are usually doing shooting competitions or going to the range every weekend and getting extra practice in and building extra skill on their own time. Or they have histories of this kind of stuff and they kind of maintain it throughout their career. But in SOF, you just don't have the resources. You don't have the training time. You don't have the ability to prioritize these things quite enough to become a super duper elite, impossible to kill human weapon like a lot of people think that SOF guys are. In the tier 1 units, absolutely, they have a lot more time to train on their own. They have a lot more time to practice hand-to-hand combat. They have incredible world-class instructors that they work with quite often. And so they're going to be at a different level as well, like a very, very high level. But even still, the best guys in those units also do stuff on their own. And that is why they are so lethal. So just going SOF, of course, it's going to equip you with a lot of skills that can help keep your family safe, keep you safe, and become less fuckwithable, but you're not going to be unfuckwithable unless you actually do a bunch of work on your own on the side. All right, so the next one is no matter what, if you go into SOF, you're going to get divorced. And although I don't have statistics pulled up, I haven't looked at them, but looking around at my friends and my former coworkers, I would say you are statistically more likely to get divorced than stay together with your wife if you are in SOF, but it can work. I definitely have survivorship bias because I stayed married and I'm still married to the same woman that I was throughout most of my career. But it can work if she or he or it, whatever it is independent and trustworthy and trusting and intrinsically motivated to go and pursue things on her own. I'm just going to say her for now because it's easier. And she has her own dreams and her own passions and does not rely on you for literally everything, financially, family-wise, support, whatever it is, then you're giving yourself a chance. There is a chance that you can absolutely make a marriage work in SOF. Is it difficult? For sure. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of really forcing yourself to be super present when you're home and communicating very, very well with your spouse. But it is totally possible. It's not a guaranteed route to divorce. Most of the people who say that it is usually ended up, unfortunately, getting divorced throughout their career, maybe more than once. And they probably know a lot of people who did too. But even if you quiz someone like that, like, do you really not know anyone that didn't get divorced throughout their entire career? They'd be able to come up with some people. So it is not the easiest thing on a marriage. And if you are a little bit shaky, you're married right now, your wife doesn't really meet those traits that I just went over, then maybe something to rethink. Just decide what's most important to you. But it can be done, especially if you pick wisely and you guys are very, very good at communicating with each other and you guys put in a lot of work and avoid mentally handicapping yourself and just thinking that like there's no fucking way that this is going to work. If you tell yourself that, then it's probably not. But if you believe it can and you put the work in, it absolutely has a possibility of working. All right, and the last myth number 9, is endurance does not matter after you're done with selection and the pipeline. And this is incredibly false. The mindset that most of the people who will claim or think this have is that they've arrived, that they've done the hard stuff, they've earned the right to be there, they've done what's necessary to become a special operator, and now they can just kind of coast because they've already proved themselves. And this is a very, very toxic mindset to have. No matter what, if you ever feel like you've arrived, like you have done all the work that's required and you don't have to continue, you need to nib that mindset in the butt immediately, because that is where complacency is born. And being complacent in any job or being a complacent adult is not going to get you anywhere in life. It's going to get you even less far in SOF, because no matter what, you're always being assessed. You're always either building or tarnishing your reputation. And if you show up and you quit on, maintaining your aerobic capacity and being able to shoot, move, and communicate, then you are selling yourself and your teammates short. I'll hear things like, I'm never going to run 5 miles for time in PTs in combat. Or all you got to do is just lift, shoot, jump, and sprint, bro. Or real men don't run, we stay in the fight. And that is a bunch of baloney, because there will be times in your career, if you're in SOF and you are going in playing a role in a world conflict, which there's not really much going on right now, but there probably will be at some point here in the future. And you can't get from A to B if A and B are several kilometers away and you have a bunch of gear and kit that you have to travel with in order to get onto the objective and then actually do your mission, which usually involves a little bit more strength, a little bit more speed, a little bit more agility. But if you don't have the endurance to get there, then your strength, speed, and agility and your ability to shoot don't really matter all that much. So the endurance standards are not very difficult to maintain, but maintaining them at the very least should be a no-brainer. I personally think what makes life more fulfilling is to try and be the best you possibly can. So trying to exceed at all times, regardless of how much warning or how little warning you get, you should be able to exceed the endurance standards. Again, they're not very difficult. Be able to run 5 miles in well under 40 minutes, be able to ruck 12 miles in well under 3 hours. I would say a solid goal is to be able to run a 35-minute 5-mile or faster throughout your entire career, be able to ruck a 2-hour, 20-minute 12-miler throughout your entire career or faster. Those things are not very hard to even maintain, even if you have no warning. That could easily just be maintained with general, well-rounded, balanced strength and conditioning training. And giving up on your endurance and letting it fall by the wayside is a massive mistake. So be able to keep up, or else you're going to be a liability to your team. You are going to embarrass yourself, and absolutely nobody is going to stand for it. So keep your shit together. So that's it. That's the last myth. Thank you guys for tuning into the video, and I will be back soon with more action from Terminator Training Method. Peace.